second race of the Grand Elite EisenDesigns Sports Car Series. A couple of weeks ago, were at Watkins Glen. Tonight, we are at Road America. Seth Cole alongside of Logan Brakey. And Logan, that's your first time doing this. So what are you looking forward to in seeing these two different car classes go at it?
Good afternoon, Seth. Yeah, this is the first time I've ever seen both these cars on track at the same time, so I have no idea what to expect. I've never driven any of these cars. I've never seen either of these cars race anywhere, so I'm mostly a spectator in today's event. So this is going to be a lot of fun for me. I'm hoping for a really good race here this afternoon.
Road America, a 14-corner racetrack. And one thing that we can kind of take away from the Watkins Glen race is it seems like no matter where you're running on track in both of these classes, no one is safe, because we saw a lot of incidents take place in the Watkins Glen event, a lot of them up inside of the top 5 for both the Daytona prototypes and the Ford GT class. So it'll be interesting to see if these guys maybe learned a little from that race of maybe not to be as aggressive early on, let things settle out, start to get into a bit of a rhythm, especially since when you consider Road America as opposed to Watkins Glen, there's not as many places to pass here.
No, for sure. It's you only get a couple corners, mainly maybe turn 1, turn 3, and Canada Corner are probably your best corners to have a really real shot at overtaking somebody. The rest of the track is mainly used to set up your overtake for one of those 3 corners. It drives similarly to in terms of chasing somebody down and passing somebody to Sonoma almost. I know they're two totally different racetracks, but a majority of the lap is spent setting up your move to pass the guy that you're racing or the guy that's in front of you. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys fare with the passing difficulty here this afternoon.
Who took the checkered flag for the Daytona prototypes back at Watkins Glen starts on pole here today, that being Kyle Hayer. We are guaranteed a different winner over in the Ford GT class, however. Daniel Rash, who won that race for his class at the Glen, is not in this field. So it'll be interesting to see who amongst the Ford prototype drivers is able to take the checkered flag here. And as you notice over on the left side of the screen as well, a different ticker for y'all. We have where it has separated out the Daytona prototype cars and the Ford Mustang machines to be able to show you where they are running overall on the track, but also where they are running to each other in their respective classes. So a shout out there to Matthew Rodriguez. He worked hard this week to be able to bring that about. So big thanks to him, and it definitely adds to the broadcast. Now, I'm going to ask you real quickly here, Logan. These drivers we saw last week, or not last week, but the last event. It's hard to remember that it was 2 weeks ago when the last event was run. But we saw where early on everyone was jostling for position in both classes. But then when we got to the midpoint of the race, it seemed like one driver kind of stood out, was able to pull away, and nobody was able to challenge them. Do you think we're going to see the same thing in this one?
I would think so. That's usually how these endurance races work. You know, everybody, especially in an endurance race that's only an hour and a half, it's almost kind of like a sprint for a lot of these guys. But it's usually one star is left to shine, and you usually see that around the half-hour mark, or excuse me, the halfway mark. So I can definitely expect to see that here today. But who knows? Maybe we'll be in for a surprise, and it'll certainly make things exciting.
Mentioned the halfway mark. People have to remember that this race is not done in terms of laps, it's done in terms of time. It's going to be an hour and a half long before we get to the checkered flag for both classes. Up the banking they go, up the hill, headed for the start-finish line, and second race of the season is underway.
Very large gap between the two classes here. That's a little unusual to see such a huge gap be formed. The Ford Mustangs are just now rounding the final corner and making their way up the hill. So the Daytona prototypes are going to probably be dealing with some pretty heavy traffic here early on in their race.
Hayer's going to get out in front. We got a spinner there. Got a couple of cars around.
That was a big spin off of turn 2, and that's usually a problem corner, especially early on, because guys don't realize how tight that exit gets. A lot of guys will try to pass there early. They'll try to make up spots because it is a little bit of a harder braking zone than turn 1, but that gets really tight real quick, and it looks like that's exactly what happened there. Just a little bit of contact there between two of the Daytona Pro. Actually, the Levi Zielinski got loose on the outside under braking and kind of just came down in front of the rest of them there. So might have just been a little bit of driver error.
The other one that spun off into the grass, I believe, was the 56 of Tate Lytle. Tate didn't get a whole lot of time to be able to run at Watkins Glen. I believe he DNF'd that race, and Zielinski's making his first start here in the Endurance Series. So both of them with not exactly a whole lot of track time last time out. Obviously, didn't take them long to figure out the slickness of Road America.
For sure, and it looks like a pretty clean start. Looking back at the Mustang pack here, no real incidents at all whatsoever. Actually, so a very clean start for all the Mustang drivers. Still pretty tightly wadded up there as they come around through the kink down into turn number 5.
You actually had an exchange for the lead there. Roger Gregory in the 33 getting around Robert Kenny in the 34, who was the pole sitter for the GT class. That is Robert Kenny behind the wheel of the 34 this week. Of course, Shane Theron was driving the 34 back at the Glen, and we got a pretty good battle here in the GT class. Second, third, fourth, you got Max Lufa there. Liam Sheen also in that mix.
Yeah, and we saw that pass for the lead be made down in turn number 3, and that's where we're going to see a lot of passes be made, because that is we got a one car wide on the carousel. Looks like he's gonna hang on to it there. But yes, that's going to be where we're going to see a lot of guys trying passes today, because it's such a tricky braking zone. The run up to the braking zone is it's pretty level and almost gets a little uphill right before the braking zone, and then once you're on the brakes, it's actually downhill to the apex of the corner as one car spins wide off a Canada corner.
I believe was the 14 of Logan that went a little wide there. And he's currently back in the 10th position of the Daytona prototypes. Up front, though, we may have a little bit of a battle brewing. Kyle Hayer out in front, but Chad Frankenfield's not that far back. And Frankenfield had a really struggling race back at Watkins Glen. He was up there inside of the top 3 for a good portion of the first half of that race. And all of a sudden, he found all sorts of issues. He was actually airborne heading into the final corner at one point, getting involved in a wreck. So Frankenfield, who out of the Daytona prototypes last time out, managed to limp it home to 9th in his class. Definitely looking for some redemption here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is he's off to a good start here. So this is none other than the best place for him to do it. We see him here. He's running about maybe just inside a second back from Kyle Hayer there in the 95. He's going to use the next few laps here to really kind of evaluate his line, see where he's running, see where maybe he's faster, and see if he can set him up into one of the harder braking corners.
Of course, a thing that we noticed in the Watkins Glen race as well is that it didn't really seem like tires were that much of an issue. And I don't know if that was necessarily because Watkins Glen may be a little bit more gripped up because a lot of cars, a lot of series go there or what. But it seemed like you could come to pit road. I think if I remember correctly, I think Kyle Hayer came to pit road the soonest of everybody. And I think it was Daniel Resch in the GT class came to pit road about 25 laps after everybody had been to pit road. And he didn't lose a whole lot of time either. So I don't know necessarily. Do you think here at Road America, with the lack of grip we're seeing early on, that maybe tires and tire wear will come into play more here than it did at the Glen?
Yeah, it's tough to say really, because you look at Watkins Glen and the boot layout that these guys ran. I should make sure I'm correct on that. They did run the boot. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they did.
Okay, so yeah, so that layout is notoriously a pretty quick layout, and so there's not a lot of heavy braking zones that these tires are going to be put under. A lot of tires and brakes rather are going to be put under a lot of stress, and that honestly goes the same for Road America. You have 3 corners that you truly are really hard on the brakes and are hard on the tires with, and that's turn 1, maybe 2, turn 3, and Canada corner are your really heavy braking zones. So tire wear it's going to be interesting to see this afternoon. The track temp is a little warm. It'll be interesting to see how the tires fare here too.
One thing that I've noticed from the Glen that I think I'm going to carry over to this is the mispronunciation of people's names. We saw that good battle going on for 8th in the Daytona prototype between the 99 of Finian. I believe it's pronounced Duchana. I'm not exactly certain, or Ducana, maybe. Logan Shea was also in that mix. And we're right now focused on the battle for 2nd. That is between, actually, no, this is the battle for the lead, I'm sorry, between Max Lufer and the 33 of Roger Gregory. And this, I'm not surprised to see the 688 of Lufer up here, because he actually was a contender for the victory back at the Glen, ran into some issues late, but he definitely looked like he was a strong contender. And I think that it's really no surprise to see him up front again here this week at Road America.
Yeah, he's definitely a driver to keep our eye on for sure after that strong performance you said he had at Watkins Glen. He's off to a good start here this afternoon, leading the Mustang class here. But he's got some work to do, as he's got a hard charging Roger Gregory behind him.
Obviously, with the different classes of cars out here and everybody all spread out around the track, we aren't able to obviously put all of the action on camera, but it looks like there have been a couple of other drivers that have encountered some issues here. Either that or they've really backed their pace down, because we saw Levi Zelensky have the early issue in one of the first corners. He's already passed a number of cars, including Jared Campbell, Logan Shea, and Brent Jones. So he has worked his way now up to 9th of the Daytona prototypes, which says to me some of these other Daytona prototypes have had some early issues.
Yeah, and looking back at that as well, looking at the 60 of Liam Sheen in the Ford Mustang, he's quite bent up on that right front. I'm not too sure exactly what had happened there. It looks like he had a very early incident, perhaps on that opening lap. So a rough start for him. He was, excuse me, he was the car that we saw slide off of Canada corner. And hit that inside tire barrier. So that was the incident for him. He's already put himself a lap down. So that's an unfortunate start for him.
Just had ourselves an exchange for 2nd place. That was Jackson Rubitard moving his way past Chad Frankenfield. So moved the 04 up to, I'm sorry, the 08 rather, up to the 2nd position. And Frankenfield may have a driver to contend with in a moment as well for 3rd, Tim Shinosky. And you're seeing right here, I believe was the 60 you mentioned of Liam Sheen now getting lapped. That's another thing that we have to pay attention to now, because the Daytona prototypes turn so much faster laps than the GT cars do. They're going to start reeling in these guys. And we saw back at the Glen, so many drivers, so many times encountered these slower GT cars in horrible parts of the racetrack.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's, like I said, I've never seen both these cars on track before at the same time, and that's one thing that I'm already baffled by, is the speed difference between these cars is immense. You look at modern day, take IMSA for instance, the Daytona prototypes there compared to the GT3s there. The speed gap is nowhere near as big as it is here, and it's so amazing how quick these Daytona prototypes are running up on the Mustangs. So it's going to be interesting to see.
This is the battle for the lead right there between the GT cars, and that was the leader of the DP cars, Kyle Hayer, trying to get around him.
Breaking him up, exactly. And this is the worst place on the track, Seth, for faster traffic to catch the slower traffic. That set of corners there is just awful, because there's no straight line track for these guys to get a run built up to get around them. But I might stand corrected on that, because the speed difference is so huge. These guys might not have as big of an issue as I might think getting through traffic there. So we'll have to see.
Look at Road America too, as opposed to Watkins Glen. I'd say there's probably more straightaways here at Road America. And to your point, the closing rate that we're seeing here today between the Daytona prototypes and the GT cars, I would think the pressure is actually more on the GT drivers, because we saw that good battle going on between Lufer and Gregory. All of a sudden, they've gotten separated because they had to concentrate on getting out of the way of the prototypes. And now the 33 of Gregory has to try running the 688 back down.
Exactly, and that gap that's been built now is just immense. In fact, Gregory had a moment off of the second to last, the penultimate corner there as Robert Kenny takes advantage and slides up to second in class. But you're absolutely right. The gap between first and second in the Mustangs is just immense because of that. It'll be interesting to see who has to do more work when it comes to the different traffic here.
There was a battle going on back there in the GT class. I think that was, yes, it was Eisenman making his way around Personette. That would be for fourth in the GT class. And he made that move off the final corner, heading up the hill. Second at Watkins Glen in the GT class to the winner, Daniel Resch. So obviously, he's got a fast race car and has proved that he can finish up at the front. This is a great battle right here. You've got actually the runner-up finisher from the Daytona prototype class back at the Glen, that being Kyle Schreihart. He's now moving by Chad Frankenfield, move him up to third.
Yeah, and I'm just still focused on the battle here between Joshua Personette and Drew Eisman here, just because once you've completed the pass here at Road America, don't expect that you're going to drive away so easily. Oh, there's a big incident in turn number 3 here, Seth. A Daytona prototype and a Mustang getting together. That's Robert Kenny and Levi Zielinski tangling up in turn number 3.
Kenny was running in second at the time for the GT class. Zielinski, I believe, was up in the either 8th or 9th position in the Daytona prototype class. And again, a lot like what we saw happen back at the Glen. These Daytona prototype cars, they close in so quickly, it's hard to be able to figure out if you can make the pass on that slower car or not.
And it doesn't look like any contact was made between the two drivers. It was just a matter of Levi maybe getting on the brakes too hard and trying to force the car into the corner when there just wasn't enough grip for it to get there, and just spun the car around. Robert Kenny did a good job of not making any contact with him and just came to a stop and let him got rolling again.
You're right. Kenny did not get any contact with Zielinski. The tough thing for him, though, is that Gregory, Eisenman, and Personette all moved around him for positions.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate scenario that Kenny got himself caught in. But he'll be able to get those spots back. It's early in the race. Whenever you have incidents happen in an endurance race, you want them to come early so you have the chance to get to work and get those spots back that you might have lost early on in the race.
So just had a point brought up. I was looking at it too, but I just was messaged to ignore the timer up on the top left. It actually will correct itself. It is an hour and a half. And contact! We got contact there. That was for, I believe, the third position. Schreihart and Frankenfield got together. And I believe another car, I believe that might have been Matt Shinosky in the 00, had to slow up for it as well. And that was right up inside of the top 3 for the Daytona prototypes.
And turn 3 again, Seth. That's going to be our problem corner. Oh, yeah. Chad just 4 cars were collected in that there. That's going to be our problem corner all afternoon, Seth. And it's such a tricky corner because the braking zone is so tricky. As I was saying, the run up to the corner is flat and level, and then it goes uphill slightly. And then right as you get on the brakes for the corner, it starts to go downhill. And downhill braking zones are the worst because your car is carrying so much more momentum coming down that hill. So it's a very, very tricky corner. That's not the last of the incidents we're going to see here this afternoon.
I've never run Road America in iRacing, but I have run it in 2003. And a thing that I remember experiencing a lot, especially in that corner, is the wheel hop. You end up having that downhill section, you get on the brakes too hard and it wheel hops, and you just cannot slow that momentum because, like you mentioned, you're at a downhill grade. It'd be a lot easier if the car was facing uphill. That helps to counter, the speed you're carrying. But when it's downhill, there's just no way to stop it if it's not going to stop.
Exactly, and especially if you're trying to make a pass on somebody, you catch yourself, and even this goes for any corner really, you catch yourself focusing more on when that other guy is going to brake, and you're trying to outbrake him, and before you know it, it's too late. You're too far into the corner. You end up locking the tires and spinning, making contact with that car you're racing, and you just completely blow the corner. It's such a tricky corner. It's honestly, I feel like it's one of the hardest corners on any circuit, any racing circuit that's on the iRacing system.
On board here with the Daytona prototype leader Kyle Hayer, who just then went down into that turn 3 corner we were talking about, and you can see up ahead of him nothing but clean racetrack. Well, as soon as I say that, there's a Ford GT car just ahead of him that he'll have to get by, but it's got to be a good feeling for him, because you mentioned the fact that right now he's kind of had a little bit of a walk in the park. He's been able to determine how hard he breaks into these corners, how much momentum he has. And that's got to take a little bit of pressure off of a driver, especially in an endurance race where, based on the fact that you're battling the clock, you basically have to go out there and lay down the best lap times you can.
Oh, absolutely. And he's got a 5.5-second lead right now over Jackson Ross. And that lead continues to grow. And he can back up the corners, especially turn 3. He can just drive nice, smooth, consistent laps. And he's got no reason to push the race car right now. So he can just take his time. He's got clean racetrack in front of him. He's got no worries of being run over from behind. So this is a perfect scenario for Kyle right now to be out there leading this early.
Couple of drivers that have not had very easy starts to their day. As a matter of fact, one of them, I believe, has already retired from the race. Joshua Personette looks like he'll finish last of the Ford GT cars as he's taken his car behind the wall. Logan Shea, I believe, is currently sitting on pit road in the 14. He is currently 4 laps down. There's a car that we're looking at right now, Michael Goodman in the 44. He's got quite a bit of damage there to the right front of his machine.
Yeah, it doesn't. The first lap, the opening laps of this race did not seem to be too kind to a lot of drivers, and perhaps that could be due to cold tires or the way these cars. I've never driven these cars, so I don't know how they handle on cold tires. But obviously, that first lap or first couple laps were a handful for a lot of these guys, and some worse than others. But we'll see how they do later on in this race if they're able to recover.
Not sure if Goodman will tear that car up anymore, but if he does, they probably have a lot of bazooka bubblegum down there. They can kind of repair the car back, stick all the pieces back on. Who knows?
A lot of Bear Bond.
Looking here at the... There you go. Continuing to show the way, we talked about the gap of, well, it's now actually increased to almost 8 seconds between Kyle Hayer and Jackson Rubitard in the Daytona prototypes. It's 10 seconds separation between Lupfer and Gregory for the GT class. This seems a little surprising to me that it's this early on we are seeing 2 drivers clearly pull away, because we actually had some good battling for the lead in both classes in the first half of the race back at Watkins Glen. Do you think there's something different about Road America that's causing us to kind of have a clear leader right now?
I mean, I don't want to say it's an easy track, because that's not true for any track on the circuit, but it's certainly one of the less challenging tracks for a lot of drivers. More importantly, the drivers with a little more experience when it comes to this type of racing. There's the trickiest sector is probably sector 2, and that's turn 4, the kink, and turn 5 and the carousel. And I believe Canada corner is included in sector 2. I could be wrong with that as well. But there's not a whole lot of challenging parts to this track. So for the more experienced drivers, it's kind of a nice relaxing drive. Once they're able to get away from the pack and kind of just run their own race, they're able to set a gap between themselves and the rest of the field.
On board there with Matt Shinosky in the 00, who finished 4th of the Daytona prototypes back at Watkins Glen. And this is pretty much the closest battle we've got on track in either class. This is the 6th position in the prototypes. Tate Lytle up ahead in the 56. Nice comeback for him after his early spin. And right now he's trying to manage the gap between himself and the 00. Everything else is so spread out right now. There's not a whole lot of battling going on track right now. Actually, there is a battle here. We just focused on Jared Campbell there. Yeah, Jared Campbell and Finian. And again, I can't pronounce that name. I want to say Ducana?
Yeah, that'd be my best guess as well. we apologize, but that's the best guess I have at the pronunciation there as well.
I can guess that the last name might be Irish, but I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, it's tough to say.
He had his hands full to Jared Campbell right there. He kind of got a little loose out of turn 3, but it looks like he is slowly closing up the gap. This would be the battle for 8th place in the prototype class.
Yeah, it's been enjoying. I've enjoyed watching this. This has been going on for a couple laps actually. Gerald, excuse me, has been closing in on Finian lap after lap, and it's like we said at the top of the show. Most of his laps have been, oh, he runs wide on the carousel here, back it off, save it. He's got it. Sweet. It's most of the lap is spent setting the other guy up, right? So he's spent his time evaluating where Finian is quicker, what lines he's running, and it's been like that for the last 4 laps or so. He's got some work to do now, though.
I find it very interesting to watch this as well because, there's a lot of different names in here that we haven't seen run in other leagues, but there are names that stand out to us, and Campbell is one of them. Obviously, you and I have covered the Xfinity Series that runs on Mondays, and he's a part of that, battling in their playoffs. But in the road course races in that Xfinity Series, Campbell always seemed to be up there in the top 5, but we saw right there with him getting off track. With the Daytona prototype cars here at a road course, he's struggling. It's amazing how you put a driver in a different type of car, send him out there at a road course, and it's almost like an entirely different driver as he just killed a cone as well.
Rip that cone and add a family, man. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Usually it's the other way around though. You put some of these road racers in the stock cars that Gerald Campbell races, and they drop like a rock for obvious reasons. There's no grip in those things, but for whatever reason, it's some of these drivers are really comfortable on a road course with NASCAR stock cars. They like the way those cars roll and slide around the corners, and they can't seem to figure out the way these cars drive with more grip and more speed and better brakes and stuff like that. So it's always interesting to see how they fare in different series.
I mean, you notice how these prototypes are way down close to the ground. That means there's a lot more downforce. But even with the downforce these guys have, we've still seen a lot of these guys slipping and sliding through the corners, which kind of says to me just that the amount of grip that there is, or lack thereof, in the track that the tires aren't able to adhere to, that downforce isn't helping a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a warm track. It is cool. It has cooled off a little bit since we've started this afternoon. But I think these old prototypes too had a lot of rear torque. So they could be lighting up the tires on exit, especially off of the slower corners, turn 3, Canada corner, the Corvette bridge, stuff like that. The slower corners, they could be lighting up the rear wheels quite a bit. We don't know. We've never been in these cars before. So it could be a matter of different factors leading to that squirreliness off the corners that we're seeing.
Right there, Max Lufer continuing to show the way. He's going to get out of the way of a Daytona prototype. I believe that's Frankenfield in the 15th. It's going to get around him. Now, obviously, as we mentioned, this is a timed race, but we saw back at the Glen that in that hour-and-a-half event, they did have to make one pit stop, which says to me they're going to be on pit road here before this race is over as well, no matter which class it is. So if we look in terms of laps, the Daytona prototypes have turned a maximum of 12 laps. The GT cars have run 10 laps. So it'll be interesting to see because it seemed like just about everybody split the timed event at the Glen in half of when they came to pit road. It'll be interesting to see if they split it in half here or if we have somebody kind of adapt the Daniel Resch strategy from last week and go as far as you can into the session before you make your pit stop.
Yeah, pit strategy always comes into play heavily for these endurance races. And Road America is one of those tracks where it's kind of tricky with the fuel because you get the first half of the track is very wide open, right? You get the long pit straight running down to turn 1 and 2, and then you get the long straightaway running down from turn 2 to turn 3. And then you get into a big sector of corners where there's a lot of braking and there's not a whole lot of throttle usage here, except for maybe the run up to turn number 5. And so it's a very tricky track in terms of knowing how much fuel you're going to use a lap. A lot of calculation goes on throughout the race. So I could see the drivers, especially in the DPs, splitting the race in half, maybe just with one pit stop. But we'll have to wait and see here.
battle brewing for second in the GT class. Both Roger Gregory and Drew Eisenman got out of the way of the prototype. I believe that was Levi Zelensky, but not that much of a gap between those two. And remember, Eisenman finished in second back at the Glen to the winner, Daniel Rash. Rash is not in the field here today, so obviously he'd love to finish one position better, and looks like he's definitely on the march towards the front, as we could have a battle for second position maybe in the next lap, maybe lap and a half.
Yeah, slowly reeling him in corner after corner, lap after lap, and obviously when you're in the slower traffic, when you're in the slower car in one of these multi-class races, you play the faster traffic into your advantage a lot. You do your best to get out of their way as quick as you can, and then take advantage when maybe the car that you're racing has either gets held up or has to kind of run a really odd line through a couple corners to let them by. It's always a ton of fun to watch those kind of battles go on, but you see Drew reeling in Rogers slowly and steadily here, so we're going to have a really good battle here in a few corners.
It looks like that last time around, I believe that Eisenman was just about.
Whoa.
I think he was trying to calculate it here. I think he was about 4/10 quicker than Gregory was, so he is slowly chipping away.
Yeah, Eisenman's last lap was a 2:31.8, and Gregory's was a 2:32.7. So almost a full second quicker that last lap. And a lot of that could have been, we did see him have to let some traffic go by as well. So that could have been a factor. But Eisenman right now is definitely the faster driver of the pair. So we'll see if he's got enough stuff for him to reel him in.
Obviously, I know that these two guys are a little bit slower, so they're able to approach that heavy braking zone in turn 3 a little bit easier than the prototypes, not carrying nearly as much speed. But just from a personal standpoint, it almost looked like they were more stable going through turn 3 than the prototypes are.
Yeah, because the prototypes rely on a lot of mechanical grip. So they have more grip the faster they go through the corner. So they're trying to carry as much speed into the in and out of the corner as they can. So the GTs, the Mustangs, kind of really roll through the corner a lot more than the prototypes do. So they are going to be a little more stable, and they don't have a lot of power to the rear wheels like the prototypes do as well. So they're not lighting the rear tires up on exit either. So that has a lot of difference as well.
We were talking about that there being a lack of battles. All of a sudden, we've got two battles going on, and both of them are for second place in the respective classes. This battle still between Gregory and Eisenman, and we just saw moments ago as well that Jackson Rubitard's about to have his hands full with Skiles Trehars.
Yeah, Drew closed right up on Roger here in Canada corner, but Roger ran a little wide, and Drew was a little kind to him here early on in the race. Had to jump on the brakes exiting the corner just to make sure he didn't run over him. A little bit of give and take here early on in the race. You won't see that later on, though.
Oh, absolutely not. We didn't see a whole lot of give and take back at Watkins Glen early on. I remember that I think it was a battle for third place between the GT cars, and we had a spin. Both drivers actually managed to battle back for decent finishes, as I recall. But this battle continues to not go away between Gregory and Eisenman. And if you're Eisenman, I mean, obviously it's a timed race. How do you pace yourself with realizing, okay, I've got this amount of time to be able to reel this guy in? When do you start to feel the sense of urgency of, okay, I know I'm a little bit faster than him. I got to get up there and pass him.
Yeah, you start to feel that when you start to know you're getting held up. And I'm not too sure that Drew has that feeling yet. He hasn't been all over the back bumper of Roger. He's been faster in a few corners, but he hasn't been held up. And so I don't think that sense of urgency really kicks in until you start to know that you're being held up by the guy that you're chasing in front. Because he's not losing any time trying to get around him right now. So that sense of urgency probably hasn't kicked in for him just yet. If anything, it's helping him run consistent lap times because you're trying to stay with that guy in front of you. So if anything, it could be helping Drew more than it is hurting him being stuck behind him right now.
A couple of other drivers that looks like have taken their cars behind the wall. Brent Jones, he will finish in the 11th, I believe, position of the Daytona Prototypes, and
Correct.
Yusef Gailey has also taken his car behind the wall. As we just saw an exchange there for second, and it looks like it almost was handed to Kyle Strayhorse as Rubitard kind of ran the corner a little bit wide there.
Yeah, that's definitely. I was trying to find it on the list there. Yeah, for about it as well as given. It's early. It's only 35 minutes into this race. Still plenty of racing left to go. So there's no sense in battling somebody too hard early on, eating up your tires, because that could really screw up your fuel strategy, your pit strategy as well.
Where did they go? Gracious.
My goodness, that's a prototypes driver's worst nightmares when a GT driver can't make up his mind on which line he wants to run to let you guys by. That was very hairy indeed. Good job by both those drivers getting around them.
That might have been was that Hines in the 87 they were trying to get around? I'm not certain, but my goodness.
Liam Sheen, yeah. Liam Sheen in the 60.
Sheen, yeah. And he's been on pit road quite a bit here, getting damage repaired, and you can see they haven't repaired it completely. That entire Ford Mustang front is completely crunched up. Still running, though, and currently 7th of the Ford GT class. Speaking of the Ford GT class, there was a driver that had an issue that we saw earlier with a Daytona Prototype down in turn 3, and that was Robert Kenny. He's been able to battle back. He's kind of just on the outskirts of being able to see on the straightaways that second place battle between Gregory and Eisenman, but he's been able to at least battle back to 4th of the Daytona Prototypes. And that's another thing too with this type of class racing is you can't look at these Daytona Prototypes and say, oh, well, I realize I'm slower than them. I really should get up there. You got to pretty much focus on who you're racing.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, as you said, he's done a great job. He's back up to 4th in class. He's luckily the 2 prototypes there caught him in a great spot. He was able to give him the inside line and let him by easily. So that didn't hold him up whatsoever. And 3rd and 2nd place are right there. They're entering the carousel, Drew Eisman and Roger Gregory. So Kenny is on a very nice recovery drive here. We'll see him back up there shortly, I believe.
Battle for second place still between Strayhorse and Rubitard. This is going on nearly 16 seconds behind the race leader of the Daytona Prototypes, Kyle Hare. And thinking of Kyle Hare as well, think back to when he was dominating around this time at Watkins Glen. He was the first of the Daytona Prototypes to hit pit road. Wonder if he'll use that same strategy here again today at Road America.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. If you tried something the race before and it worked out, why not try it again, right? Don't fix it if it's not broken. So I have no doubt in my mind that he'll try maybe a similar strategy to what he did 2 weeks ago at Watkins Glen that helped him finish where he did. No doubt in my mind he'll try it again.
It looks like Drew Eisenman at some point got around Roger Gregory for second place. You just saw him getting out of the way of this second place battle. So now Eisenman moving into the second spot. He's got about, I believe, well, actually, we got to wait for the ticker to update here because we've actually on our ticker got Tate Lytle in between Lupfer and Eisenman, as it looks like actually Tate might have actually taken his car behind the wall as well. So that is the 4th of the Daytona Prototypes to retire out of the race.
I'm just looking back at that battle as you mentioned. You want to guess where Gregory went wide? I'll give you 3 guesses.
Turn 3, perhaps?
Turn 3, absolutely. Just went wide under braking again, and that allowed Eisenman to just cruise right on by on the inside.
Now as it's updated, Eisenman has about 25 seconds to make up on Lupfer. So while that battle for second's been brewing, Lupfer has just been pulling away. And he has increased it now over 20 seconds back to the second place driver. This battle for second, though, in the Daytona Prototypes continues to be hot and heavy. Rubitard may have run wide in the corner and allowed Strayhorse by, but he wants the spot back. Yeah,
absolutely. And I didn't realize, I'm sorry, I was speechless there with the lead that Max Lupfer had. That's very impressive drive from him. And 40 minutes in to be out to 2 seconds 25 seconds. Sorry. As I say that, he runs wide in the kink on this run down to Canada corner. Always a sketchy moment whenever you blow that kink a little bit, because that's such a hairy spot to run wide at.
there trying to get out of the way of this battle for second. You just saw him there on the left side as both Strayhorse and Rubitard moved drivers right down that straightaway. But yeah, with Luke for right now, just kind of managing what he has to do, hitting his marks, staying out of the way of the Daytona prototypes, and that's a big reason, I think, why he is currently where he is with the interval he's gotten. So now, with him having as dominating a lead as he's got, now you got to think into his mind what would be his strategy for coming to pit road. If I remember correctly, Lufer was one of the drivers that split the segment up at Watkins Glen. Right down the middle, came down pit road with about 45 minutes remaining. So we'll see if maybe he does that here, or maybe now that he's got this 25-second lead, if he maybe tries something a little different.
Yeah, when you're out in a lead as big as he is, you almost, speaking personally, I would just run. I wouldn't try any kind of special strategy. Run the car till it's on fumes, pit in, top it off, and see if you can make it to the end. You have 25 seconds. You obviously have way more pace than anybody else does on track right now. So if maybe your strategy is not exactly that great, you have the pace to make it up. But I would run this thing until it's coughing on fumes and try and just one stop it.
That we're watching continue for second place. These drivers are currently on 18 lap old tires, and the lack of grip we saw early on in the race with new tires, it would make me wonder, if you're Rubitard back there, you're being able to keep within closing distance. If you do get up there with a chance to battle, how hard do you battle Kyle Strayhorse for second place, especially knowing you may not have the grip underneath you had beforehand, and there wasn't a whole lot of that to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always, battling for position is always going to eat your tires up. Whoa, a little squirrely under braking there. Battling for position is always going to eat your tires up because you're going to be driving the car a lot harder than you normally would. But honestly, I think in these guys' mindset, unless something happens to the race leader, Kyle Hayer, these guys, this is as good as these guys are going to finish. So they're going to race very hard for second place. So it's the track temp is dropping as well, which obviously helps tire wear. So I'm curious to see. I don't know how tires wear in these cars. I'm curious to see maybe what the call is on pits. We could be totally wrong. These tires might not be wearing near as much as we think they are.
You could be right, because it didn't really look like tires wore a lot at Watkins Glen, and at that point it actually looked like they were. So maybe with seeing them slipping and sliding around, maybe they actually do have more grip than we originally think with from a third person standpoint. And to your point, maybe they will run as far as they can here on the tires that they've got. I'm watching here. I've been watching the last 2 or 3 laps of why this battle has continued on between the two, and it seems like both these drivers have their strengths in 2 different halves of the track. The more braking zone area from like turn 5 maybe to turn 12, that's where Strayhorse seems to be better. On the straightaways, it seems like the car behind him, Rubitard, has better speed, and that's from about turn 12 maybe over to turn 3, maybe as far as the straightaway to turn 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, we got a car off track on the smoking car. That's again Liam Sheen in the 60.
I think he just blew it up there, Seth. He was running. That's quite a lot of nose damage he's been running around with. I think the engine finally just let go for him. I don't think he had another spin or anything.
Oh no, he wrecked with another car. He wrecked with, I believe that was the 60 or not the 60, I'm sorry, the 87 of Richard Hines.
He absolutely did. Side by side through the kink is never something you want to try, especially in cars that have so little grip like these Mustangs do. They almost made it work, but just had some contact on exit there. And unfortunately, I think that's an end to both these drivers' days. That was a pretty hard lick.
Yeah, that was pretty hard hit, and that's the trouble with road courses. There's hardly ever any safer barriers implemented at the road courses. You either hit a concrete wall or you hit a tire barrier.
Yeah, when you have a big off like that, your day is pretty much done. That's unfortunate for both those drivers. Liam especially just could never really get the race going that he wanted to have, so that's a rough day for him for sure.
Richard Hines currently was in the 6th position of the GT class, and we'll see. He's probably going to have to bring that car to pit road, I would think. He nosed it pretty well into that wall, so That'll maybe lose him a couple of spots. The only good news, I think, for him is Sheen, who is running behind him in the standings, and the only other driver on track for the GT class, Michael Goodman, has had his issues as well. So Hines may still be able to remain in the 6th spot, but obviously not what he was looking for, and kind of basically, as you mentioned, not a good spot to be battling each other in.
Yeah, and Seth, I keep watching. Have not been able to take my eyes off of this battle for second in the Daytona prototypes between Kyle Strayhars and Jackson Robillard. The fourth place car, Tim Shinowski. I've been keeping an eye on him because he's been running consistently quicker laps than both of these drivers. With the odd slow lap thrown in there, I think due just coming into contact with the slower traffic. But this could be a 3-way battle for second here in a few laps time if we're not careful here, if these guys really start getting into it. So keep your eye on this.
You see him right there, just back in the camera view there, down this straightaway. Yeah, he's starting to close in. Who knows? He may, if these guys race each other a little too hard, he may inherit a second place position. If these guys manage to end up getting... Oh, we almost lost it back there.
We shouldn't have said anything. The commentators... He lost it off of Canada.
Strikes again.
Yep, we apologize to Tim for that one. That's unfortunate because he was catching him. He was putting up a charge, and he was going to make it a 3-way battle for second. We won't speak any more of that. We'll let him get caught back up again.
He did not fare well back at Watkins Glen, was 12th of the Daytona prototype. So obviously, despite that little bit of a heart attack there in that corner, still running a lot better than he did 2 weeks ago. But this battle for second continues on board here with Jackson Robillard, and he is. It looks like for the moment he seems content to ride behind Strayhars. I think right now he's just kind of sizing him up, seeing where his strengths are as opposed to Strayhars' weaknesses. Maybe kind of thinking about what he might do after they make the pit stops if they end up being in the same relative area.
Yeah, and I was just I'm glad you brought that up because I was just about to say the same thing. It looks like he's kind of just riding at this point. He's trying to just stay close and wait until both of these guys have to come in and change tires or just top off on fuel and maybe see if he can jump them in the pits. Because he hasn't really made any aggressive attempts to try and get around Kyle. So I would definitely think he's probably just riding around for right now and just kind of keeping him in his grasp.
With this being an endurance race, there is no caution to be able to bunch these guys back up. So if you're someone like Strayhars or Robillard that are currently running in second and third, and you're running now 12 seconds behind the race leader, Kyle Hare, is there anything you can think of that they could possibly do themselves to be able to close that gap up and at least maybe have a shot at this win?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the gap. They keep doing what they're doing because they have closed it. They've closed it down a second because the last time I checked it out, it was a good 13 seconds that Kyle Hare had created on these two. So these two kind of just riding. Kyle Hare has really backed his pace up. So they have caught him a little bit, as we see Jackson making a look to the inside in turn one. That's a I want to say ballsy place. I don't know if I could say that in the air, but I just did. Nice move there into turn one.
Strayhars did not put up a challenge. Looked like he was more than willing to give the spot up, backed off a little bit. So that's going to move, as you mentioned, Robillard up to the second position, as Michael Goodman's going to give them lots of room through that corner and let them get by. Another thing that I was noticing as well was that, again, the battling has kind of gone away. This is the only battle we've currently got on track. We had quite a number of battles before, but now this seems to... Well, actually, hold on. I think actually we got a battle just ahead of these guys right here between Eisenman and Gregory. That's starting to heat up again, and now you've got all these guys all together here. The battle for second in both classes all together.
Mixing things up, absolutely. And Roger and Drew have not really separated all that much since we last saw them battling, and those two DPs just brought them right close together once again. So we've got two really good battles going on all over the track right now.
looked like Gregory was able to let those two prototypes by out of turn 3. Eisenman had to do it at the top of that hill, which kind of messed up his corner. And that's, as you mentioned, that's what closed the gap up again between Eisenman and Gregory in this battle for second.
Yeah, when you're in a slower car, like slower traffic, that's the worst place you can be caught by faster traffic, because it's just so hard to find a line, because you're going from the left-hander that is turn 4, and then you're going to the right-hand kink that's turn 5, and then another left-hander in turn 6. So you're constantly adjusting your racing line to try and set yourself up to make those corners. And when you're weaving back and forth like that, it's really tough for the prototypes. As we see Jackson dive in the pit road, I'll finish my thought. Really tough for those prototypes to get around the slower cars in an quickly and effective manner.
Rubelard's going to give up the second position. He's going to hit pit lane. First of the prototypes. Got another one on pit road as well.
Kyle Hare in as well.
Yep. Kyle Hare is in. There was another driver that ducked onto pit road also.
I believe that was a GT. That was I think there was another prototype. Leader.
Yeah, there he is. Tim Shinosky, the 91, also hit pit road.
Yep, that was our 4th place prototype. Absolutely. And then the GT leader, Max Luper, was also in as well.
You see him right there as Levi Zelensky's leaving pit road. So that turns the lead over here to Drew Eisenman. So now comes the question, if you're Eisenman, if you're Gregory, you've just passed Lufer. Obviously, Lufer's going to have fresher tires. He should be good to go the rest of the way now, because this was just past the halfway point of this race. We're now at the 43 minutes to go threshold. So I don't know. Is there any way, since we've documented back at the Glen how older tires and newer tires didn't really matter, especially when you ran a few laps on those new tires, they kind of equaled out. I don't know. Is there something that Eisenman can do now, or Gregory can do now with the track position they've gained, that they won't lose it when they come to pit road?
Yeah, it's really because they've been battling for such a long portion of the race. Neither of them have really, I can't imagine, save tires and try and minimize the tire wear that they're putting on the car. So I have inexperience really is my worst enemy here for commentating this race this afternoon, because I have no idea how much these tires are wearing. I imagine they're going to be wearing a heck of a lot more than the prototypes, just due to lack of grip. So it's going to be really hard to say whether or not these two will not take tires to give themselves a little bit of an advantage on the leader of Max Lufer whenever these two come in the pit.
Saw Kyle Hare in the 95 just worked his way around these guys. He now is in second, with him coming to pit road. That turned the race lead over to Kyle Strayhars, so he's currently out in front. And Strayhars, of course, finished second to Hare back at the Glen, so we'll see if he's got any idea. And you mentioned, too, that before those pit stops began, it looked like he and Robillard were actually closing in a little bit on Kyle Hare. So maybe here on these older tires, he's finding a little bit more speed, finding something that works for him, and maybe he can utilize this with not coming to pit road as soon as Hare did to maybe cut into that lead a little bit more.
Yeah, and he might be able to try something like taking no tires and just filling up. I'm looking back at the pit stop now that Kyle Hare did to try and see maybe if he took tires, trying to get an idea of what these guys might do. It looks like he did. The car was on jack, so he may or may not be able to push the no tire issue. We'll see. He might be able to play a little bit of strategy here to see if he can keep himself in front of Hare.
Right now, he has about a 33-second lead back to Kyle Hare, but he still has to hit pit road. So he will obviously lose time based off of that. The question is, though, will there be a difference of an interval between himself and Hare? If Hare takes the lead, we'll have to see if it's larger or smaller than about 12 seconds, because that was about the gap between the two of them when the 95 ducked to pit lane.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do math is not my strong suit, so I've been trying to just work out to see how long they were in the pits for based off of like prior lap times and what the gap was. I don't want to. I might turn the mathematical stats over to you there, Seth, to try and work that out. But you see, Strayhard staying out yet another lap, really maybe trying to push the fuel a little bit to see if maybe he can keep this pace up, which he seems to still have. He seems to still have quite a decent race pace right now. So he's building that gap as we speak to Kyle Hayer. So curious to see what his strategy is here.
22 cars took the green flag to start this race. We are now past the halfway point and only 15 cars remain, 9 of them out of the prototypes and 6 of them out of the GT class. The 2 most recent drivers to the garage area, the drivers we saw involved in that wreck, Liam Sheen and Richard Hines, they have now retired from the event. So everybody, at least in the GT class, they will be finishing with a top 6, and everyone in the prototypes, they can finish no worse than 9th in their class.
Yeah, and that's good news for some drivers to see a lot of, especially. I'm more surprised by the amount of retirements from our DPs versus our GTs. Usually, you see it being the other way around, but a lot of 4 retirements, I believe, already for the DPs, as you said. So that's always a plus if you're one of the slower drivers in that class. That's some free positions gained there. So. Good news for them.
It's kind of interesting. You know, you look currently at our running order for the prototypes. You got Strayhorse obviously out in front. You got Hayer in second, and you got Matt Shinosky there in fourth. Those currently are the only drivers that finished in the top 5 back at the Glen that took part in this event. So right now, all 3 of those drivers currently are en route for back-to-back top 5s in the first 2 races of this 3-race series.
Always a good day whenever you show up to a race and your competitors that are ahead of you not. So you always know you're going to close the gap on here. It's always a plus side to the day, no matter where you finish. Really, you're going to gain points on the guys that don't show up. So. Good day for those guys. And Kyle Strayhouse continues to stay out. He's still running consistent lap times that are a quick race pace. So he's really I can't tell if he's pulling a gap or not to Kyle Hayer. It looks like he might be ever so slightly. We'll see whenever it comes time for him to come in and pit, though.
The gap between himself and Hayer has kind of fluctuated between 30 to 31 seconds. He seems to gain a little and then lose a little, but it really hasn't fallen under the 30-second interval. One gap that is closing up is for the Ford GTs, though. Eisenman continues to stay out, but his gap between himself and Lupfer, who has hit pit road, is now been cut down to 8 seconds, and he is continuing to close. So it looks like we may have more of a battle for the prototypes win than we will for the GT win, especially with the pace that is currently being set by Lupfer.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Roger Gregory, who car we saw battling with Drew Eisenman for majority of this race so far, pit and last lap. So he's dropped back to 4th now. Robert Kenny up to 3rd in class, and Max Lupfer, as you mentioned, in 2nd. We'll see what Drew Eisenman does this time around. We'll see if he comes in now, seeing that his main rival for this race has pit. We'll see if he chooses to stay out or elects to come to pit road, and it looks like he will be staying out for yet another lap.
I don't know what we did to Michael Goodman, but he nearly took out one of our cameras right there as he was getting out of the way of the race leader, Kyle Strayhorse. Strayhorse currently continuing to manage the gap. It's still 31 seconds between himself and Kyle Hayer, which says to me we're seeing a lot of what we saw at Watkins Glen, even though Kyle Hayer got a little bit of an advantage with those newer tires.
Here he comes
runs
now.
A couple of laps and it kind of cancels out. So, and we see now it's going to be Strayhorse onto pit road. So we'll see what the gap's going to be between himself and Hayer when this pit stop is completed.
Yeah, and Seth, that gap started to close a little bit. It was 33 seconds, and as you mentioned, it dropped 31.2. So a good call by Kyle Strayhorse to bring it in. He knew that his pace was starting to fade a little bit. Kyle Hayer rounding the final corner right now as Strayhorse is still making his way to his box. So the gap might be close to what it was whenever the cycle first started. We'll see what he does here.
And I think that one thing that might actually play to the advantage of Strayhorse here is he was running at least somewhat decent lap times in comparison to Hayer on older tires. So you put newer tires on that car, you almost wonder if he's got a car that could get up there and battle with Hayer. But We'll see what the gap's going to be, as you saw the exchange for the lead right there. The 95 moving on by and taking the lead back.
A fuel only stop for Kyle Strayars there. I did not see the car go up on Jack, so that's an interesting strategy call. We'll see how that plays out for him. Honestly, it doesn't look like it gained him any spots because he came out in third behind Jackson Robillard.
Right, he did. I was wondering if maybe he was going to be able to come out in second, but you're right. He's right back where he started, behind both Hare and now Robillard there in the 08. So we'll see if this call was going to help him in the long run or not. We do know now that everybody up here that is pitted, they can make it the rest of the way on fuel. Some of them split it right down the middle, around 45 minutes to go. Strayhorse, I believe, came to pit road with about 35 minutes remaining, so they're all good to go on fuel. Now they've got what they've got, and they've got to try and drive it to the end.
And that's honestly the best way to finish an endurance race. We love to see if these guys can just close each other in based on raw pace. Fuel strategy is a thing you look for an exciting finish in NASCAR. It's the opposite in endurance. You want it to come down to raw pace, and that's exactly what it's going to be this afternoon.
With Robillard taking the second position, we'll have to actually wait and see what the gap's going to be between himself and Kyle Hare. It looks like it actually may have grown since they all came to pit road. Looks like now it is about 17 seconds separating Hare from second place, and that battle for second may heat up again, perhaps about 2 seconds separation between Robillard and Strayhorse.
Yeah, that would be my guess. Kyle Hare crossing the stripe right now, and Jackson Robillard rounding the final. So we'll see here at the line what the gap is. We'll wait for it.
That was close right there between Chad Frankenfield trying to get around. I believe that was Ethan Riesener's 86.
So the gap now between first and second in the DP is 13 seconds, which is roughly where it was towards the beginning of this race. So we'll see if that gap closes down throughout the end of this race. It seemed like it did once Kyle Hare's tires started to get some wear on him. That pace seemed to slow up a little bit, so we'll see. And keep in mind, again, Kyle Strayars did not take tires, so really interesting to see what he can do in terms of pace towards the end of this race.
That battle brewing here for fourth in the prototype class. Matt Shinosky trying to hold off Chad Frankenfield, who I've been actually watching his lap times the last couple of times around. He's been running lap times either the same, if not better, than the race leader Kyle Hare. And it's kind of been like lightning has struck twice for Chad Frankenfield, both here and back at the Glen. He runs into an early issue. It puts him so far back early on. He spends the rest of the race playing catch-up. He's been able to battle his way back up to fifth in the prototypes. We see him battling for fourth, but we're seeing right here, he's got a car that's got race-winning pace, but he loses so much ground with early issues. He just isn't able with, even though it's a long race, he just doesn't have the time to be able to combat it and be able to fight back.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too. That's one thing that is tricky with Road America, and one of the reasons why we say it's so fast, because there's so. You think about it. There's only 14 corners here. That's not a lot for a road course compared to some others you find on the circuit, such as like maybe Sebring or Road Atlanta or something like that. Someplace else that these cars might go. So it's not a lot of corners for Chad to really make up a lot of time. It's a lot of straightaways, and that's not ideal whenever you're really trying to close a big gap like he is right now.
We talked about with Strayhorse coming to pit road as late as he did, he lost second place to Robillard. I'm actually looking at a driver that maybe could benefit from the same situation in the GT class. Now, we know that Lupfer's already hit pit road. We're waiting for Eisenman to come to pit lane. Robert Kenny, currently third in the GT class, he has also been to pit road. So it'd be interesting to see if maybe we might see a battle for second between himself and Eisenman when the 77 finally does decide to come to pit road.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of raw pace that Max has had all afternoon. You see Drew, he is not pit yet, so he is on worn tires, but Max Lupfer has pit, and he's just reeled Drew in. So Drew is really, you got to think now, he's trying to build himself as big of a gap as he can to maybe second place or to third place. He's not He's not thinking about winning right now because he knows how quick Max is. He's trying to think about how am I going to get myself out as far as I can to finish as best I can here this afternoon.
This battle for fourth in the prototype continues on. Yeah, right now of the GT class, the only two drivers yet still to pit, Eisenman and also Ethan Reasoner, has not been to pit road yet. Fourth currently in the GT class, but there's only 5 of the GT cars that are out on the track still. We have had another of the GT cars retire out of the race, and that is the 33 of Roger Gregory.
Wow, I didn't even...
who had been up inside the top 3 most of the day in that GT class.
Wow, I'm curious to see as to what happened there, if he had an off or something that was... Oh, that's unfortunate. He was putting together a strong run.
Most of the day running either in second or third place, and he has called today, so we got 14 cars still left on the track.
He lost it off of the Corvette bridge, Seth. He just ran a little wide on the exit, got the power got the power down too early and nosed it into that outside barrier pretty hard, and that's unfortunately this late in the race. It's hard to recover from that, so he just called it a day. But that's really unfortunate for him. He was putting together a good run.
The battle is back up for a second place. Stryhars has been able to catch back up to Rubillard, and they were side by side going into turn 1. We got this battle here side by side as well. This is actually the exchange for the lead in the Ford GT class.
There and this is there's no riding around now. This is go or go home. This is a heavy battle, and remember, Kyle Stryhars did not take tires, so he's running out there right now on worn tires versus Jackson Rubillard, who did take tires on his pit stop. So this is some really exciting stuff.
The only thing I would kind of wonder, if you are Stryhars, is, he obviously wants to get as high a finish as he can, and that right now would be second place. But you had a second place run back at the Glen as we got the 77 of Eisenman messing up there. I think he may have overdriven turn 3 just the least little bit, went into the grass. But, the one thing you want to do if you are Stryhars is, based on the fact that he's got old tires, you don't want to wreck yourself while trying to pass for that position.
Yeah, exactly. You want to make sure you're going to, if you take the gamble and don't take any tires, you want to make sure you can get to the end of the race with those tires. Yeah, you still want to fight the guy, in this case, Jackson Rubillard. You still want to put the pressure on him and see if you can force him into a mistake and take second from him. But you also want to make sure that you yourself are going to get to the finish of this race. And right now, it doesn't seem like he's worried about that. We might see if he backs off later on in the race.
Saw Frankenfield take 4th from Matt Shinosky, so move him up another spot. But he has about 33 seconds before he could get up here and maybe make it a 3-man fight for this second position. We also have currently, I believe... Well, I thought maybe the 77 might be coming to pit road, but nope, I guess not. He's still continuing out on track as Frankenfield. Oh my goodness, he almost lost it off the corner. He almost got jacked up by Shinosky as well. That was a close call.
Yeah, that was very, very hairy indeed. That'll make Chad's heart skip a beat. Man, that's a huge wiggle off of Canada corner. And that's a tough place to lose it too, because it's narrow. There's not a lot of run there on that exit. Oh, a great job by Matt to get that thing slowed down in time too.
At the tough break though for Shinosky though, it lost him all his momentum. I mean, Frankenfield was able to gather it up, drive away. Took a little bit longer for Matt to be able to gather his car up and get his momentum back, and now that gap between 4th and 5th has opened up quite a bit as a result. Actually, I believe he's on pit road, isn't he?
Yeah, he lost his engine out of the final corner. Matt Shinosky did. I'm not sure what had happened there. I don't know if...
I don't think he hit Frankenfield. It didn't look like it.
No, I
wonder if he maybe downshifted or something.
You could be right there. He probably pulled out some drastic measures to make sure he didn't run over the back of him. I gotta wonder if maybe a little bit of net code. I don't know. It looks like he changed down the first.
I don't know either.
He changed down the first briefly, but it doesn't sound like it did all that much mechanical damage. Yeah, I'm curious as to what happened there because there's obviously no cosmetic damage on that car, so interesting to see what made that engine expire.
A tough break, too. I mean, he had just lost the 4th position, but still was running up inside the top 5. And boy, in a matter of about 30 seconds, has a great save, doesn't run over Frankenfield, and all of a sudden this happens to him, a mechanical failure. And looks like it's going to have him finishing in the 8th position out of the Daytona prototypes. As actually another prototype has retired out of the race, Jared Campbell. So that actually leaves us only 13 cars on track, maybe 12 if the 00 can't get back out there.
Oh, he money shifted, Seth. He money shifted off of the final corner. He was top of the revs in second gear, and mental lapse, he shifted back down to first. And yeah, that'll do it.
You just brought up a great point, too, that maybe we don't really talk about as much in these type of races, but really it's as relevant as anything. You know, these drivers, they're out here. They've been out here currently for over an hour, about an hour and 7 minutes. Sooner or later, the mental game comes into play because you've been out here turning laps. Sometimes you can almost fall into a trance when you go around these type of racetracks of, you know, continually making laps, continually taking the corners. And like you said, those kind of mistakes can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's rare to see it this well, in this case, it's late into the race, but we're only an hour and 15 minutes into a race, so it's rare to see it at that time, at that amount of time. But absolutely, it's mental fatigue can take over a lot quicker than you think, especially if it stays green the whole way. A lot of these guys are oval drivers, so they're used to maybe having a little break thrown in there where they can kind of collect their thoughts again and get a rest, get a drink of water. But yeah, absolutely, mental fatigue is a factor here this afternoon.
This battle for second place, still the closest battle on track in the prototypes, but it has widened just the least little bit, and I think we're starting to maybe see those older tires start to play a little bit of a factor into Streihar's losing ground to Rubillard.
Yeah, and I jump back to the Mustang GTs here briefly. Drew Eisenman finally has made his way on pit road. I'm not sure. Trying to see, he might lose a spot to Robert Kenny. No, he's going to come out just in front of him.
Yeah, it's going to be close between those two, though, I think.
Yeah, how about half a straightaway separating those two? So Kenny's.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be closer than it was.
I did too, but I forgot that how slow these Mustangs are. So a little bit
exactly.
of work to do.
We saw Rubillard and Streihars go around Kenny, and I thought, oh, they're just now going by him, so that means that Kenny's not far behind. Well, yeah, that speed difference, no, he's not that close.
Yeah, so he's got a little bit of work to do if he wants to close up into second place of Drew Eisenman there. But a great recovery drive from Robert Kenny, having that issue early on. He's back up to third. No doubt he'll be pleased with the drive he's put on this afternoon.
As of right now, looks like the 00 is still on the track, still on pit lane, I believe, as well. He has not taken his car behind the wall, so we still have 13 cars currently still on track. Currently 8 of them out of the prototypes, 5 remaining in the Ford GT Mustangs.
And it looks like going back to that second place battle of the DPs, it looks like those tires are starting to take an effect on Kyle Streihars. They're starting to wear a little bit. He has been running a little bit slower lap times. Last time by, he ran a 2:04.3 compared to Jackson Robillard's 2:03.7. So perhaps he's backing off a little bit, making sure that maybe he can get to the end of this race. And maybe, because Jackson Robillard is no doubt trying to build a gap between those two, maybe those tires are wear off and they'll be able to close back up again and give us a show here in the closing laps.
Certainly have to wait and see. You know, you think about endurance races too, and really maybe drivers we don't look at early on, or maybe drivers that struggle. It seems like then we get to the closing stages, they stay out, they run all the laps. Drivers ahead of them have issues, and before we know it, they're up in a pretty good spot. Levi Zelensky was the first car to spin around in this race. He's been able to battle back to 6th of the Daytona prototypes, so definitely a long day for him, but at least it looks like he's going to be coming away after early struggles with a decent run.
Yeah, for sure. He was that guy that we saw spin in turn number 2 on the opening lap. Obviously not a brilliant start, but he's had a heck of a drive, and he's, as you said, he's been able to drive his way back up to 6th, and not all that far off of. Well, actually, is he? They've got him scored as P6. Oh, he's a lap down. Okay.
He's about a minute and 15 seconds currently
Yeah.
behind 5th place Tim Shinosky.
Tim,
Great run for Tim. He actually back at Watkins Glen finished 12th of the prototypes, so a much better run here today for him at Road America.
Yeah, absolutely. I was confused there with I didn't really down because I saw how close he was to 3rd and 2nd, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a little maybe a mix up in the scoring, but yes, he's running the lap down there, but still a great showing nonetheless, especially given the start that he had.
Strayhorse hasn't really let Rubillard get away, but he hasn't closed up the gap either. And to your point, if Rubillard does start using up his stuff, I'm not certain though. Even if he does use up his stuff, back before they made the pit stops and we were watching this battle, it still seemed like Rubillard had a better long-run car than Strayhorse did, as Strayhorse with a little bit of an issue there.
A little bit, yeah. I think that's just the old tires screaming in pain, trying to make it towards the end of this race. That's a highest speed corner, a little bit of an error there running wide, but it didn't seem to hurt him too much.
I don't think he's got the car to be able to catch Rubillard for 2nd place, and he's got to remember too, he's got about a 40-second gap back to 4th place Chad Frankenfield. So I think right now your mentality has to shift gears. You no longer are battling for 2nd place, you're trying to maintain 3rd.
Yeah, exactly. He's in a podium position, and the finishing on the podium is always great, and especially in endurance racing. So he's just trying to make his way to the end. The best he can do is run smooth, consistent laps with the tires that he's got, and honestly let Jackson come to him. And if he continues to do that, he'll take care of what tires he has, what little rubber he's got left on those wheels. And who knows, Jackson might begin to fall back to him, because as far as we're concerned, he's still pushing to try and pull that gap away, because it has not been increased all that much.
This definitely has shaped up an awful lot like we had back at the Glen. 2 clear race leaders, Kyle Hayer for the Daytona prototypes, Max Lufer for the GT class. Now, obviously, Hayer was the class of the field back at the Glen, but you think about Lufer, 2 entirely different races for him between here and Watkins Glen. At Watkins Glen, I remember it was the first couple of laps, he ended up wrecking with somebody for 3rd place. He was able to battle back for 7th, but I think he got caught up in another wreck at some point during that race. Definitely a much different race here today at Road America, and I think a big portion of that was him getting the lead early, and as we saw during the first half of this race, continuing to build up a gap back to 2nd.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all getting through the getting clear of the start of an endurance race. It will honestly make or break your race, no matter how long the race is. If you can survive the opening laps, that's when everybody's going to be trying to race really aggressively to try and get as much track position as they can. And if you can survive those opening laps, you put yourself in a really good position to finish strongly. And that's exactly what Max has done this afternoon. So great, kudos to him.
See, as this battle is going away for 2nd place between Rubillard and Strayhorse, at the same time, Kyle Hayer is actually now beginning to increase the gap between himself and 2nd place. It's now almost 15 seconds, about 14.7 seconds between himself and Rubillard. So, again, I think he's back in the mindset of just going out, running laps, and that is actually helping him to be able to gap Rubillard. I'm not certain. Maybe Rubillard might be overdriving a little bit, trying to reel in the 95. We've seen all day that Hayer has had the best car. I just don't think Rubillard can catch him, and I think he's kind of hurting himself more than helping himself if he is trying to reel the 95 in.
Yeah, it's a 14-second gap. It's hard to close that up in the 10 or so minutes that these guys have left running. But the good news for Jackson is the gap to the car behind and Kyle Strayhorse is increasing significantly lap after lap. Those tires are really starting to go away on Kyle's car. So it's really smooth sailing for Jackson right now. All he's got to do is just run his race, and he's got second pretty much locked up.
We may have lost the battle for second, but there's a good battle still going on here in the Daytona prototypes. This is for sixth between Levi Zelensky and Finian Ducana. They are currently in sixth and seventh. And Zelensky hard into the wall.
The 180, I think he kept it off the wall. I think he did a really good job of keeping that car together. Did the full 180. My goodness,
now
style points. Again.
Wow. I thought I saw a piece of the car fly off, but what I think I saw go in the air was actually dirt.
Yeah, for sure. He spun that puppy hard, and that's an incredible piece of driving to just loop that thing around and get it going again. That was a scary moment indeed for Levi. I think that's the second car this afternoon that we've had the unfortunate situation of jinxing into an incident. We've got to watch ourselves here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is with the commentator's curse, but Zelensky looping it around there. Now that lost him only one spot. That does move Ducana up to sixth. But that's, I think if I remember correctly too, isn't that where that same straightaway, isn't that where we had the incident between Sheen and Hines? So it seems like some drivers have had some issues there.
Yes, it was. Yeah, that was they nosed it into the opposite wall that Zelensky was heading. That's always a problem spot because that is a tricky late in the run, especially. That's a tricky kink to get through. It's you don't break through there. It's a lift only thing. But if you miss your entry there, you have a pretty hairy exit to deal with, and that's exactly what Zelensky did as well. So it's a tricky part of the track.
Now here, nothing but clean racetrack here. He's encountered a couple of GT cars here and there, but the good news as well, if you think about it, for Kyle Hayer is there's only 5 GT cars out there, so they're few and far between when he encounters them, so he can kind of pick and choose when he wants to pass them. Right here, he's going to make the pass. I believe that was on Eisenman, currently in second place of the GT class.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. He's got a huge gap. He's not in any pressure to get around that traffic quickly. So if he needs to, he can just back off and let him get settled into a line before he throttles it up and gets around him. That's just the advantages you get when you have a lead that big and are running a race as great as he is. So he's doing everything perfect here this afternoon.
We are nearing 12 minutes remaining. And just to remind everybody how it works as far as the endurance race finish. If we reach zeros on the clock and the race leader of the Daytona prototype class does not hit the start-finish line, then the white flag is out in the air. If the leader crosses the start-finish line before we hit zeros on the clock, he has to race back around. That's when the white flag is in the air, and then we race it back to the checkered flag.
Correct. Yeah, and that's one of the confusing things. Kind of. Is, well, why was that a white flag lap, but then last week this one was not a white flag lap, and kind of thing. So it's a tricky thing to remember too, especially if you're the slower traffic. Like, you don't know when that white flag is going to be. So it's always towards the end of a race. It's always an added element that you have to think about, especially if you're in a tight battle with somebody for position.
Here is Hayer's going to get around Michael Goodman. Clears him easily. Trying to look and see if we've got any possible battle brewing. The closest battle still is for that second spot between Rubillard and Strayhorst, but that has over 2 seconds between the two of them. Everything else is kind of opened up. I thought we might end up having a battle again between maybe Ducana and Zelensky. Thought maybe Zelensky might be able to recover, but that gap has opened up between those two by 7 seconds. So really, there is not a whole lot of battling going on right now. So we're kind of just basically focused currently on the race leader, Kyle Hayer, and basically just watching the timer go down for the most part.
Yeah, and that's honestly, we're not the only ones doing that. The drivers are doing it as well. They've kind of locked themselves into the position that they're in. So they're kind of in cruise control almost, because they're just waiting for that timer to run down, as you said, and finish where they've worked so hard to get to. It's just the way sometimes this endurance racing plays out.
I mean, 10 minutes to go. Nobody really to battle. Nobody out the windshield. Nobody in your rearview mirror. It's basically just bring it home in one piece. Maintain the position you're in.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if maybe this battle for second will tighten back up if the tires start to go on Jackson Robillard's car. Doesn't look like they are yet, although Kyle was quicker that last time by. Looks like he might be starting to catch a second wind, maybe push the car a little bit more, and out of these taking care of his tires a bit, see if he can make one final hurrah here to finish second.
And one thing that he and Rubillard have done, while they necessarily haven't closed up just yet to rekindle that battle for second, both of them have actually gapped themselves back to Frankenfield. So Frankenfield currently is about almost 44 seconds behind Strayhorse. So Strayhorse now might have a little bit of a cushion to be a little bit more aggressive, try and get up there, maybe get second away from Rubillard. My assumption is he's going to wait until maybe about 2 minutes, maybe down to around the minute mark before he really starts getting aggressive. That way, you know, if he spins out, he's got at least a little bit of time to recover and maybe still finish in third ahead of Frankenfield.
Yeah, exactly. And you just got to hope that if you end up being aggressive and you make a mistake that costs you going off circuit, that you don't hit anything in doing that. So there's still a little bit of risk to go with that reward. I tell you what, though, I've been watching these guys for the past few laps, and going through that kink on the run up to Canada Corner, every single time it looks like Jackson is on the edge of losing that race car. And same with Kyle. And I just pray that neither of them do, because if one of them were to go around, that would be detrimental to both of their races.
Definitely. You got to kind of admire, though, the gutsy call there by Strayhorse going with no tires.
Oh, yeah.
He's done a pretty good job in terms of lap times of keeping that car under him, keeping pretty good pace as well. I know that obviously he didn't really gain much in track position out of it. He was third when the pit stops began. He came out in third, but still, to go with that kind of a call and still be able to keep the car under you with the amount of grip issues we've had here today, pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. He's done a phenomenal job. I'm honestly astounded he's made it the full. Well, he hasn't yet, but he looks to be able to make it the full hour and a half on one set of tires. That's so impressive, especially with how hard he's been driving it this afternoon. A tip of the cap to him.
It'd be interesting to see these guys in the season finale as well. That's going to be on January 29th. They've raced an hour and a half at the Glen. They're about to complete an hour and a half here at Road America. 2.4 hours at the Daytona Road Course await these guys in a couple of weeks. That's going to be a wild one. And maybe, just maybe, I don't know, nighttime conditions in Florida, will there be grip? Will there not be grip? I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things that we've got coming up is that big old Daytona, the Rolex 24 at Daytona. So we've those of us that are running it, myself included, have been running a lot of practice laps there, and the nighttime there is the right time. There is a lot of grip out there, Seth. Track temps drop to as low as 68 degrees Fahrenheit. You got to remember, it's January on the ocean, on the, what is that? That's not, I don't know what coast that is. I don't want to butcher it and get it wrong. I almost said Pacific.
East.
That would have been horrible.
Well, that's the Atlantic coast, the East Coast.
Yes. So it's a very chilly night there once the sun sets on Daytona. So there's going to be a lot of grip for these guys at night whenever the sun goes down there. So it should be some really good racing.
I like how Matt Rod chimes in there, East Coast.
Well, I knew it was East Coast. I didn't want to get the ocean wrong.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
Caribbean Ocean, of course.
Yes, that's the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Florida.
Closing in on 5 minutes remaining here. The gap actually, I think now, between first and second has kind of maintained itself. It's been anywhere between a second and a half to maybe a second and 3/4. Really hasn't closed up. Kyle Hayer, again, continuing to show the way. He's got almost 15 seconds between himself and second place. You see Loop for here as well. He's got almost about a minute and 20 seconds before you get back to Drew Eisenman. So Right now, both these guys, as you said, on cruise control, just trying to make it to the checkered flag. And I think more for Hayer than for Lupfer if Hayer does make a mistake. We mentioned, about them making mental mistakes. Go back to Matt Shinosky with that gearing problem.
Yep.
It's not absolutely definite yet that Kyle Hayer is going to win this race. But if he makes a mistake, if he gets off track, if he loops it around like we saw Zelensky have happen to him, is 14 seconds, do you think, enough of a gap to be able to recover and keep the lead and hold Jackson Rubillard at bay?
Well, it's just, you said it. It depends on how big of an off it is. If it's a spin in a loop and he's able to keep going it again, like we saw Zelensky do, I don't think a 14 second is enough for that really to close up. However, if it's a big off and he puts himself in the gravel or something as such, then we can start talking about that scenario. We hope that doesn't happen because Kyle has driven a heck of a race this afternoon. But just out of the realm of possibility, it would have to be something as detrimental as that.
It's really interesting, too, when you look at, the two differences of Watkins Glen and Road America. But for the most part, the strategy at both venues has been exactly the same for Kyle Hayer. He got out in front. He was able to grow a gap. But both at the Glen and here today at Road America, right around the halfway point of the race, he was one of the first Daytona prototypes to come to pit road. So what do you think? Going to a track where we've got 2.4 hours at Daytona, does that change up the strategy at all if you're Kyle Hayer?
I would certainly think so. Absolutely, especially if there's a day and night transition, because the car is going to handle a lot differently during the day than it will at night, just due to the level of grip. So I would definitely think that the strategy changes pretty immensely. 2.5 hours is a long time compared to an hour and a half. Because you think about it, we'd only be halfway through this race right now. So there's still plenty. There's still going to be plenty of racing left to do at this point come Daytona. So strategy definitely, I think, would change from that standpoint.
I would certainly agree with you. Under 3 minutes to go here at Road America.
Jackson Robillard ran
focused on Looper
of the race.
Wow, yeah, you're right. He did. Oh my goodness.
2:02.9 really pulled out a gap there on Kyle. Kyle was starting to close in on him a bit, and I think Jackson saw that. I better get going, and get going. He did. It's a really quick lap. I believe that might be the fastest of the session.
And I'm a little interested about this because we're now having an exchange for fourth place, and I don't know if Frankenfield had an issue or what, but he looked really slow going down that straightaway headed to turn 3. Tim Shinosky went around him very quickly, and he'll now move into fourth. I don't know if Frankenfield's got some kind of a problem here. I don't know if he might have spun. I don't know if he messed up a corner, but he was a lot slower than the 91.
I was looking back to see what the issue was. It looks like the lap 41, he ran a 2. Yeah, he's way off the pace. I'm not sure, Seth. I think Tim Shinosky is just on it. He wants that fourth position, and he took it away from Chad. I genuinely think he just got caught and passed.
I'm looking at lap times here, and most of the race leaders were running 2:02s, 2:03s. Frankenfield's last lap was a 2:12, so he obviously had some kind of an issue on that lap.
You're absolutely right. A 2:10 and then a 2:12. So there's some mechanical issue going on with that car. I'll go back and take a look if I can.
That was an exchange for fourth place. That moves Tim Shinosky up to the fourth position. And we mentioned earlier about his hardships at Watkins Glen, finishing 12th of the Daytona prototypes there. And this is going to be interesting, too, because we are now at 55 seconds to go. We're under a minute. I don't think that Kyle Hayer is going to get back to the line before the time runs out. So he, I believe, is heading towards the proverbial white flag when he hits the line the next time.
Yeah, white flag in the air here this afternoon. He can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Kyle Hayer, once he comes around to
he hasn't hit the white yet.
Yeah, once he comes around to take that white flag, he can finally breathe a sigh of relief. He's just got to be smooth and steady for the final lap. He can.
Oh, that's gonna be close. Hold on. He might actually beat the timer to the line. We may be at 2 to go. We'll see here. Oh yeah, we're at 2 to go. He'll see the white flag next time around with about 12 seconds left on the timer and he hit the line.
Even still,
no, they are saying it's the final lap.
I have no idea.
Our ticker's saying it's the final lap, although there were 12 seconds still left on the clock, so I don't know if that was an admin call to have the white flag displayed there or not, but we had not yet reached zeros when he hit the line.
Yeah, it's I didn't see the white flag displayed on my screen. I don't know if I might be delusional. I can't remember if that shows up for me or not as a spectator. I don't think it does. But either way, it's a very comfortable lead for Kyle. 13 and a half seconds. Just has to negotiate these 14 corners. Nice, smooth, and steadily, and this is as good as his.
We just saw him move his way around Chad Frankenfield, who again laid down another very slow lap time of 2 minutes, 16 seconds. So obviously something happened to him in the closing stages of this race. Looks like he'll still be able to limp that car home for a 5th place finish in the prototype class. I guess we're going to go with what the ticker's saying, that this is the final lap, perhaps. We'll see if the speed decreases on
the start-finish line.
Yeah, when he crosses the line, we'll see.
Just an awesome drive from Kyle. He got him. I believe he qualified on pole, and he just never looked back. Was never challenged for the lead at any point in this race, except for maybe the first couple laps, and obviously lost the lead during pit cycle. But I mean, this has been his race. He's owned the keys to the track this afternoon. Just a really great drive for him all around.
No doubt about that. And really, if you think about it too, 0 mistakes from the 95 car. He has been picture perfect every single lap. Now he's coming here. I believe he is coming to the checkered flag. We'll wait and see if this is the checkered or the white. He crosses the line. If this is the checkered, he's won. Okay, so this is the white flag. All right, so this is the white flag of the race here. I think. Yeah, well, now he's backing it off. No, I guess that was the checkers. All right, so Kyle Hare did take the checkered flag.
You're absolutely right. I guess he was staying in it to make sure he didn't get run over. A great drive for him this afternoon.
2 for 2. 2 for 2 here for the prototype. So now we'll wait for the 688 of Max Lupfer. Actually, I think... Did he already take the checkered flag for his class, perhaps? Because it looks like he is also currently coasting.
Yes, I believe he did. He would have taken it.
Right.
Yeah. I'm trying to...
That's another thing about these two different classes. It's hard to tell who's taking the white flag in their respective classes.
Exactly. He's still in the gas. I think he could be on his white flag lap now. But, I mean, it's the same scenario as Kyle Heffer. He's absolutely no pressure for him. He could run around here at 2 miles an hour and he'd be home free.
And that's actually not an accurate statement either, because
we don't
over a minute and 20
that.
seconds ahead of second. So
yeah, exactly.
No, we don't recommend it, but it probably would still work. And he got back to second. It possibly would still work.
And it's a great drive from him too, because these cars with the speed that these guys, or lack thereof rather, these GTs, the Mustang GTs had to build the gap that he built is just it's so impressive. He's on a lap of his own. Drew Eisenman finished second, 8 laps down. Max Lupfer won his class, but he was overall 7 laps down. So he was a lap ahead of second place. And you see him now doing a little celebratory snake pattern as he comes down to turn number 1. Well earned for him this afternoon.
Not sure where Kyle Hayer's going there. He's traversing through the tire barriers there, but it is official now. Kyle Hayer wins here at Road America for the Daytona Prototypes. Back-to-back wins for him here in the Grand Elite EisenDesigns Sports Car Series, and Max Lupfer gets his first win of the series at Road America for the Ford GT class.
Put on a pretty good show for those fans down there in turn number 3. Burnout's got a little congratulatory tap there from Jackson. winning 2 in a row before he did those burnouts. Good to see the show of sportsmanship there from Jackson. Everybody, all those top 3 guys all drove a great race this afternoon. It was really a treat to watch.
Definitely was, no doubt about that. And that's the thing about endurance racing too. People may tune in and they may expect, that they're going to see everybody battling for the race lead, but that's not how endurance racing works. Endurance racing is almost like a mental game of chess. You're all spread out and you got to figure out, is it pit strategy? Is it the way I approach the racetrack? Is it tires? Is it fuel? What is it traffic that's going to get me that position ahead of me? Or, a lot of times you're not necessarily racing for the win. You're racing the car that's in front of you. And that's just how this endurance racing works out. For Kyle Hayer today, I don't think he was battling anybody. Same for Lufer.
Yeah, exactly. He, as I said, he started on the front row and he just never looked back. It was a very smooth sailing day for both those drivers, and it was just a real pleasure to watch him pull off that show this afternoon.
Our normal finishing results that we bring up do not split them by class. So what we're actually going to do is show you results based off the ticker we've got here on the left side of the screen. That will show you who finished where. Kyle Hayer with the win. A good run there for Jackson Robillard, because the first time this season that we've seen him, he didn't run at the Glen, and a great performance out of him. And Kyle Strayhars there in third place. So Hayer and Strayhars have managed to finish in the podium in back-to-back races. You got to think they're going to be 2 of the favorites to look at when we get to the 2.4 hours at Daytona.
Yeah, absolutely. He showed pace both weeks, and you can bet your bottom dollar he's going to show pace at Daytona. That's a track that drivers love to go to along this track here Road America this afternoon. Daytona is a favorite among many just because it's such a huge grand spectacle of motorsport. So definitely do not count him out whenever we head there for the 2.4 hours.
Rest of the drivers that finished in the prototype class, Shinovsky going to finish in 4th. Chad Frankenfield brings it home in 5th. And then you had Finian Decana there in 6th and Levi Zelensky in 7th. Those were the only drivers that finished the race for the Daytona prototypes. You can see all the rest of them down there of where they finished from Matt Shinovsky, Campbell Lytle on down. They all DNF'd. For the GT class, it was Lufer with the win. 2nd was Eisenman, Kenny in 3rd, Reasoner 4th, and I believe Goodman was the last car of that class to finish. So of the 9 drivers that took the green for the GT class, only 5 of them finished out this event.
Yeah, and that's it's unfortunate to see that over half the class, well, not quite half the class, but that many cars in your class end up not being able to make it to the black and white stripe there to finish the race. But a good drive from those top 5 drivers. They all ran a good race. Robert Kenny, again, going back to him, he had a great recovery drive there with the incident early on to bring it home 3rd. Great show from him this afternoon. Drew Eisenman bringing it home 2nd after we saw him and Roger Gregory battle it out, go toe-to-toe for the first half of the race. Really unfortunate what happened to Roger to bring him back and finish 6th. All in all, just a great show of driving all around from the GT drivers.
If you look at like the 2 drivers of each class that might be like a heartbreak driver, to your point, I think that definitely Roger Gregory would fit into that for the Mustang class. And then I think for the prototypes, probably would be Matt Shinovsky having that gearing issue with that tremendous save of not running into the back of Frankenfield in that battle for 4th. And unfortunately, that mechanical issue took him out.
Yeah, that was certainly unfortunate to see because he was looking at maybe a top 5 finish there, maybe a top 4 even. So it's unfortunate when you see something as simple as just a little mental mistake cost the driver their entire afternoon of hard work.
For our coverage of today's event from Road America. Now, back at the Glen, I came in cold turkey with this type of racing. Logan, you came in today cold turkey with this type of racing. What do you think with this type of action that we saw here today? What's your opinion of it?
Yeah, I mean, I always love endurance racing. I love car championship. It's so fun that element of the multi-class racing where you have the in this case, the half second quicker Daytona prototypes closing up on the GT cars. And we would see two totally different battles be mixed up in the same set of corners, and really ruin one another's battles for the time being multiple times this afternoon. And that's just the added element that endurance racing, multi-class endurance racing, brings to the table. So it's always exciting no matter what cars are out on track. It could have been Skippies and Formula One cars out there. It still would have been just as exciting. So I always love sitting down and watching these races, and it was a pleasure to commentate. And my first multi-class endurance race that I got to commentate, so that was a pleasure.
Let's get some opinions from the drivers as well of what they thought of the action. We're going to be hopefully getting to interview the top 3 finishers of each respective class. Let's start with the third place finisher for the GT class, Robert Kenny. Robert, it's Logan and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Yeah, I gotcha.
All right. Well, obviously a little bit of an up and down day for you. Things didn't start out so great. Talk about first that incident going down to turn 3 between you and one of the DP cars.
Yeah, I was just trying to stay wide a bit, let him go through on the outside, not disrupt his race too bad. But I guess he kind of locked up on the apex and just kind of slid across the track. It was a good thing I was looking out for him, because I would look out my window netting and just see him. So I'm like, all right, I'll keep going straight and stop. All right, I'll go around him. And by the time that happens, I lost probably close to 5 to 10 seconds. So I had to try to make up time somehow.
Hey, I think you ended up losing a couple of positions as well to other drivers in your class. So with an early incident like that, you were able to battle back to a third place finish in the Ford GT class. How, as a driver, like, what is the mental state from that point of having that issue, losing spots, to getting to third place? I mean, how do you kind of, I guess, coach yourself, I guess, through the race to be able to work your way from something like that towards the end to a third place finish?
Well, really, you just gotta put it out of your mind. Just put it behind you, 'cause you just gotta look forward into the future of the race. And I put it out of my mind. Like, all right, that happened. Time to put my head down and then try to find some strategy. So during my pit stop, about halfway through the race, I decided not to take tires and only take just enough fuel to the end. Hoping the tires would hold, and they did.
Robert, as Seth touched on, you spent a vast majority of this race kind of driving back through the field to get back all those lost positions and times. In the Mustangs, did you find it difficult to really find pace with these cars? There's obviously not a lot of grip, and the bodies tend to roll quite a bit through the corners. Was it difficult to find pace throughout the race?
Uh, for me personally, yeah, I'm usually more of the come from the oval side of iRacing, so this was just to kind of familiarize myself with the road racing side. So I would either underbrake or overbrake the corners, and just if I would underbrake, I'd push off. Well, I would understeer just enough so I get like 2 of my tires off the track, and then it's just it's an interesting car to try to get a hold of, coming from the oval side. But after about 10 to 15 minutes in race, I got used to it enough, and just I could predict what it was going to do with my driving style.
A good comeback finish for you there, third of the GT class. We're going to give you the opportunity here, hand over the mic, and give you the opportunity to do some shout outs.
Oh, I just want to shout out to the league for putting on the racing, and then you guys for both being on the car and also broadcasting the race, and then Sim Speed Shop, and Astro Gaming also on the car. And unfortunately, my teammate couldn't make it tonight, Bronson Stafford, but he's always a good guy to race with.
All right. Well, congratulations on your third place run, and we wish you luck in the upcoming 2.4 hours of Daytona.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good luck.
All right. Next up, let's get the second place finisher of the Daytona prototype, making his first start on the season. And that, of course, is Jackson Robillard. Jackson, Seth and Logan up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
I do. Hello.
Your first start on the season and up in the top 3 all day long. One thing that I was kind of wondering, I was wanting to ask someone that was driving these Daytona prototypes, it looked like the car that was so close to the ground was the car that was having the most difficulty getting through the corners, sliding through the corners. Was there downforce to be gained with these prototypes?
Honestly, I don't know. I've never driven this Daytona prototype before. Driven the C7, but not this one. This was my first session ever in this car, so I have no idea.
We definitely saw you having a great battle there with the 07 of Kyle Strayhorse. Looked like your car in the battle between each other for second before the pit stops was just a little bit better, especially in the straightaway sections. Would that be an accurate assessment?
I don't think so. It was a fixed setup, but I might have been coming out of the corners a little bit better. I don't know. The draft is such a big deal that when you're behind somebody, you're always going to be faster in a straight line.
Jackson, you spent a good, as Seth touched on, you spent a good majority of this race, if not all of it, worrying, maybe not worrying, but having to focus on racing Kyle all race long. Did that have any effect on any sort of strategy that you might have wanted to play coming into this race, or did you kind of just adjust as the race went on?
Not really. I pitted about halfway. I took a little bit more fuel than I maybe should have, but that was because I figured if we got split up in the pit stop, I would be burning a little bit more, not being behind him. But no, I don't think it really affected strategy too much. It was a lot of fun racing with.
It was a lot of fun to watch as well. And for the first time in the car, you definitely did a great job, put on a great performance in second place. We're going to give you the opportunity here, turn the mic over and let you do some shout outs.
I'm afraid I don't have any shout outs to do. Sorry.
All right. Well, nonetheless, a great run for you, a second place run. Hopefully, we'll see you at the 2.4 hours of Daytona and see what you can bring to the table there.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll make that one, but hopefully. This was a lot of fun, and I'd love to do it.
All right. Well, congrats, man.
Congrats,
Thanks.
Jackson.
Thanks to you guys for broadcasting.
All right. Let's get in the race winner of our GT class, Max Lupfer. Max, Seth and Logan up in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Yep, I got you guys loud and clear.
Well, definitely a far cry from the struggles you had a couple weeks ago at Watkins Glen. Logan was touching on this as the race was going on. How in the world, with a GT car, were you able to get such a big gap?
So, one of the other series that I race, Grid Life iRacers, we're currently running a season with the Mustangs, so I've had a lot of practice in this car of lately.
So that's it. That would explain quite a bit there, Max. It was a very impressive drive to watch you. I believe to watch you pull away like that. I believe, man, it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes into the race. You were already 25 seconds ahead of second place. It was just, how do you find the pace in a car like the Mustang? It just does not seem like there's a whole lot of grip through the corners in those things.
The Mustangs, they take a little bit of, you just gotta let it kind of roll through the corner a little bit and then wait to get on the throttle. If you're too eager on the throttle, it tends to want to understeer really badly and push you out wide. So you have to just give it a little bit of a wait to get on that throttle, and then you can just mash the loud pedal.
Was there any sort of strategy as far as fuel and tires that you had in the back of your mind coming into this race, or did you just kind of play it out as the race went on?
I kind of took the same strategy that I had at Watkins Glen, where I was just going to basically break it up into 2 equal halves. I knew tires halfway would at least be somewhat beneficial, at least half a second to a full second per lap right out of the gate. So I figured I'll try to maximize my use of tires by pitting halfway. So I just matched my fuel for that. Pit stops times for tires and fuel are roughly about the same. So it makes a nice quick pit stop. And was able to get back out, fell back into third place, and then was able to run down first place and pass him before he completed his pit stop.
Obviously, with the big gap you were able to have early on and through the entirety of the race, pretty much the cars you had all around your vicinity were the Daytona prototypes. So from a GT driver standpoint, at this track as opposed to Watkins Glen, how much more difficult was it, or was it easier to be able to maneuver out of the way of those prototypes in a lot of these corners?
I'd say it's definitely a little bit more difficult here. There's quite a few corners, 7 and the kink especially, where you don't really want to run too wide or really have anyone trying to look on your inside going into them. So a lot of it was just making sure that I was talking to some of the DP drivers in the chat and just letting them know, hey, I've got my run into here, wait till after. Just take it easy. You're not going to catch the person in front of you by dive bombing into those corners.
A dominating performance, nonetheless, a great run for you here today. We're going to give you the opportunity, turn the microphone over, and let you do some shout outs.
All right, so I'd just like to thank Grid Life. They're kind of the series that got me going back into iRacing. They're who I race with both online and in real life. It's a great series, great group of people. I highly recommend checking them out and joining us for some really fun races.
Well, definitely a fun race tonight. You're the winner of the GT class, and hopefully you can carry this momentum into the 2.4 hours of Daytona. That's going to be an interesting one as well. And obviously, I think tonight definitely puts you up there as one of the drivers we'll be watching in that event.
Yeah, I'll be getting my laps in at Daytona here over the next 2 weeks for sure.
No doubt. Congrats on your win here today, and we may talk to you when we get to Daytona.
Thanks, guys.
Congrats, Max.
Thank you.
Help if I actually move the correct person. Wow. Oh, man.
We'll gloss over that.
Yeah, so that's a first for me. Okay, now let's bring in, hopefully I don't move up the wrong person. Let's bring in our winner from today's race from the prototypes, Kyle Hare. Kyle, it's Seth and Logan up here in the Flatout Racing Network booth. Got us?
Sure do, guys. What's up?
Back-to-back wins, Watkins Glen, and here today. You started on the pole here at Road America and never looked back. So when you're out there in front and there's really nobody behind you, what as a driver goes through your head?
Well, I think tonight the Mustang traffic was really, really sketchy. And I knew coming in that it was going to probably be worse than Watkins Glen, just because at the Glen, you can use the downforce of the DP to get by the lap cars. At Road America, it's mostly just straights and then hard braking zones. And the difference in performance in the brakes in these cars isn't that big. So I knew it was going to be a little sketchy getting through traffic. And I had a couple awkward moments, especially the first run through the Mustangs. But other than that, keeping it on track was a little trickier tonight. I actually spun out. There was 2 Mustangs that crashed at the exit of turn 7, and I was watching them in my mirror, and I spun out in turn 8. So I had a little bit of a silly moment there, but all went well from there.
Saw that at Watkins Glen, you had a strategy going in, halfway point, you came to pit road. You were actually one of the first prototypes to hit pit road in that race. Looked like you applied the exact same strategy here because we saw you come to pit road, one of the first prototypes around the halfway point here. We're going to be going to a longer race, the 2.4 hours of Daytona next time on the 29th. Is there going to be a differing of strategy now as opposed to these first 2 races?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these cars go about 50 minutes or so on fuel, and in a race that's about, an hour and a half long, it makes sense just to kind of come right on down at 45 minutes and split the run in half and maximize the tires. I haven't thought about the strategy for the 2.4 hours of Daytona yet. I'm not really sure I will think about it. My general philosophy for these races is if I can't split it into equal parts, I'll usually just go until the tank runs out and then kind of sort it out from there. So it's kind of a as I go sort of thing.
Kyle, with as big of a lead as you had already, and almost as comfortable as it was there at any point in the race where you were just kind of content with the lead you had and kind of cruise around and wait to see if that gap would close up before you started pushing again to try and build that gap back up, or was it go the whole length of the race?
I don't know if I was necessarily content. I mean, I always want to have as much lead as possible, and I was glad I did. The biggest lead I had, I threw away with my spin, but early in the race, I knew that the draft here in this car is so powerful that if those other drivers were able to stay within about a second and a half, they could just draft right back up. And fortunately, I was able to kind of break that and run away. But I think for the last 35 or 40 minutes, I really didn't gain anything on Jackson and Kyle. And I was trying to, but they were just as quick and they were actually drafting together. And I think had they been up next to me, I think there would have been a very exciting battle for the lead. So you just try to get the lead while you can early, while everyone else is fighting behind you, and use that pole to your advantage.
We talked to Lupfer, who won the GT class, from his standpoint as a GT driver of how difficult it was to get out of the way of the faster Daytona prototypes. From your standpoint as a prototype driver, comparing today's race from the Watkins Glen race, was it easier or more difficult to maneuver through traffic?
I think it was a little bit more difficult. I mean, I guess in a vacuum, I think it might be the other way around. But I think after last week, or last race rather, the race at Watkins Glen, there was so much difference between the cars in the corners because of how much of a downforce track Watkins Glen can be. And Road America is a pretty straight line shot. So in some ways it was easier on the straights. It was easy to blast right on by. But in other places, it's pretty tricky because, the Mustangs slow down okay, and they get through the corners at slow speed okay. So there was a lot of challenges, I think, approaching slowing cars for the corner and that last minute decision of, do I dive in here or do I let them have the corner? So I think that was a challenging part tonight. I don't think it'll be so much of an issue at Daytona next round, though.
We certainly are looking forward to finding out if it will be an issue or not. We're assuming, being a nighttime track, there'll be a little bit more grip, and so the downforce will probably come into play. But we're going to now give you the opportunity here, turn the microphone over to you, and allow you to do some shout-outs.
Yeah, I want to thank Grid Life for coming on board and being on the race car, and have a very exciting season for us coming up in 2020. Where, of course, we do the commentary for Grid Life Touring Cup, which is a brand new wheel-to-wheel series that started in 2019. It's incredibly exciting, and their first round is at Circuit of the Americas on February 15th and 16th. So make sure you check out Grid Life's YouTube channel for that live stream when it goes up. But all in all, it was a good night for the number 95 Grid Life Riley DP team, and we'll see you guys out at Daytona.
All right, Kyle Hare, back-to-back wins. We'll see if he can go 3 for 3 on the season here. We'll wish you luck and look forward to possibly talking to you when we do get to Daytona on the 29th.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too, Kyle. Thanks.
All right, so that's going to do it here for our post-race interviews. And looking forward to the 29th, Logan. I mean, Daytona, it's going to be a pretty interesting track, obviously, to say the least. According to what Kyle's saying, he's expecting that we're going to be having the same kind of downforce for the prototypes as we had at Watkins Glen. So that kind of says to me it's all going to come down to how you approach the corners as to whether you're going to make good lap times or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And all that time is to me made in that infield. And that's where all the corners are on the track. You've got the bus stop on the back straightaway, but the rest of the track is just a NASCAR oval. So all the time is going to be made up in that infield section. And it'll be interesting to see who's got the handle of things throughout the race come Daytona.
I definitely think I'm going to know if I have a pulse or not if we see some prototypes closing in on a GT car heading on that backstretch bus stop, because that is going to be such a tough place for them to maneuver around slower traffic. But
it's such a high speed corner stuff, and it's a heavy break going into there, so it's always a hairy situation whenever the faster traffic approaches the slower traffic up there.
So the points going into that race as well, we've also got here, looks like basically the battle is going to be coming down for the prototypes between the Kyle Hare and Kyle Strayhorst. They've got 16 points separating them. We may have a little bit more of a points battle for the GT class. Drew Eisenman currently leads that by 5 points over Max Lupfer, tonight's race winner for the GT class. Robert Kenny not that far back as well, as he is currently 12 points back from the points lead. So that's really going to be our points battles going into the finale, the third and final race at Daytona. That, of course, is going to be on the 29th. But We've got some other stuff that's going to be coming up here as well on the Flatout Racing Network. Of course, we've got the Iowa race. Logan and I are going to be bringing you that on Monday for the Mega Driver 86 series for Elite Racing League. We, of course, have the sim races for mental health. They'll be having their modified race on Thursday evening. And then, of course, we've got, as we mentioned, on the 29th of January, the season finale here for this series, the Grand Elite EisenDesigns Sports Car Series. But Logan, I want to thank you for joining me here this evening. It was a pleasure to have you in the booth with me calling this action.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to broadcast alongside you, Seth. I enjoyed the hell out of it today. So.
And of course, we know that Daytona and Florida are on the East Coast, courtesy of our control man here tonight, Matthew Rodriguez. Appreciate him handling all the controls and the cameras and everything. Always, it helps me to be able to concentrate on commentating rather than having to multitask. So appreciate that as well. And hope everybody enjoyed tonight's broadcast. It's a long one. It's an endurance race, but certainly a lot of action goes on in between the green flag and the checkered flag. And hope you guys tune in for the finale at Daytona on January 29th. But until then, for Logan, Matt Rod, and myself, we wish you all a good night. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks.